Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so I'm on a mission to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I'm so delighted to invite my very special guest expert to the show. Mary Quist-Newins is with me. Mary is the president of MoneyWeave, LLC. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Caroline. Great to be with you today.
Oh, I'm so happy. We're going to have a great conversation, Mary, about women and money, hidden traps, and secret talents. And I want to tell our listening audience all about you. Mary Quist-Newins is a certified financial planner and financial industry academic. She is strongly committed to providing holistic, independent, and well thought out advice to her clients, her students, and the public. Mary has had the distinction of serving as adjunct professor and past director of the Center for Women and Financial Services for the American College, as well as instructor of certified financial planner studies at the University of St. Thomas. Mary owns MoneyWeave, an independent financial planning firm in Minneapolis, and she's an investment advisor representative and registered representative with Cetera and Advisor Networks, LLC. Member of FINRA, SIPC. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. And with over 23 years of experience in financial services, Mary's a recognized thought leader for her contributions to the industry and the economic well-being of American women, which is why I've got her on the show today. She has been honored as one of the 25 outstanding leaders in finance who happen to be women by Treasury and Risk magazine, and National Woman of the Year by Women in Insurance and Financial Services. Her publications include the textbook Women and Money Matters of Trust, as well as white papers, articles, and quotes in USA Today, Wall Street Journal, The Daily Beast, Fox Business, ABC News, Consumer Reports, American Express Open Forum, you name it. Mary's been there. And she earned her Master's of Business Administration and a Master's in Financial Services. And I am so thrilled to have you with me, Mary. You've got a great bio. It's so impressive.
Oh, well, thank you, Caroline.
You're so welcome. So let's dive right in, my dear. In your books and your articles, you talk about women and the money paradox. Now, tell me what you mean by that.
Well, Caroline, when it comes to money and women, there's really two sides of the same coin. So the paradox really has to deal with a contradiction, what seems to be a contradiction at first glance. On one hand, we hear a lot about the growing affluence of American women. And today, it's widely estimated that the nation's privately held assets, about half of them are female-owned. And by 2030, not too long from now, 2/3 of the nation's wealth will be in the hands of women. On the flip side, though, and far less publicized side, is that women have disproportionately higher financial risks than do men. And so it's significantly important for us to be mindful of those. As just as an example, women are far more likely to become impoverished as we get older. Some estimates that there are 3 in 4 Americans over 65 living in poverty are female. So we have both good news and not so good news as women we need to be cognizant of because they affect our financial future.
Wow, that's incredible, those statistics. My goodness. So what are the implications of this paradox?
So it really begins with whether we like it or not, everything we do, everything we touch, the people we care about most, our most deeply held passions devolve to money.
Yeah.
And this means that we need to be really highly intentional about how we plan and how we use our financial resources. Since we not only have growing economic clout, but also higher money risks or traps, I like to call them, we need to be especially engaged in growing, using, giving, and protecting our wealth.
And I love how you talk about being highly intentional. I think that's often the gap for women, right? We do it by default. We're not as well educated in financial matters, and we don't necessarily seek that opportunity to learn more. So bravo, highly intentional. That's a great takeaway. So where do we start, Mary? Get us rolling.
Well, it's exactly right, Caroline. The highly intentional means that we first need to acknowledge that financial planning is, whether we like it or not, one of our job
Yeah.
description as women. Whether we're single or married, whether we're widowed or divorced, or among greatest the boomer, Gen X, Gen Y generations, doesn't matter. We need to be intentional and we need to be engaged. And it's been my experience that many of us just kind of avoid taking action or really controlling our financial future. And studies show, just as an example and some perspective, that just a very small minority, one out of about four women, have even tried to calculate how much they needed for retirement, or put it the other way, three and four have not, which
Wow.
is arguably our biggest financial decision in our lives. So the first step is just to say, yep, this is my job, and I'm taking ownership for my financial future.
Excellent. And again, it can never start too early, right? So our young women who are in university and considering that next stage in life, now is the time that they need to invest in the future, as it were.
Exactly right. It's never too early, and it's just never too late.
Good.
So
Good to hear.
it's taking that first step that it is our job.
So let's talk about the risk factors that women really need to know.
Yeah, there are five risk factors that women need to know and care about because they affect us at a disproportionate rate relative to men. And so the five are: one, lower lifetime earnings; two, caregiving; three, higher incidence of disability, whether it's during our working years or during retirement; four is greater longevity; and five is singlehood.
Hmm. Singlehood. Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, singlehood, it's now estimated that we are at a tipping point in our American culture, that there's actually 51% of adult American women are single. Whether or not that's by choice or by intention, that just means that we, as a gender, are more responsible for our own financial future than ever before. And with the divorce rate is what it is, and with the average age of singlehood by some estimates at age 55, it is very likely that most of us will be decision makers at some point or another, and it's important to be prepared for that time.
Excellent. Thank you for that definition. So why should we care about these risks or financial traps, as you call them, Mary?
Well, financial risks, I mean, really has to deal with that concept of I might lose money.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not something that people really like to think about. And as a result, they don't, many of us don't deal with them at all. If But if we're not aware of what our risks are, it doesn't mean that they just kind of go away. What it does mean is that we're unintentionally assuming risk, and so it's important to expose them, to bring them out into the light and deal with them, so that we have a game plan for if and when the unthinkable happens.
Right, right. So let's go through these a little more. I'd love to dig a little deeper. Tell us about the impact of lower earnings, and let's talk about being a caregiver, right? Since that's a scenario so many people are in, whether it's elderly parents or someone who's ill or taking care of kids, right?
Right, and there's some degree of a combined impact between these two dynamics. So let's first talk about the pay gap. Many of us have heard about the pay gap. It's often in dispute. The fact that it exists is not in dispute, but how it's measured and by
Yeah.
whom it's measured is often an area of controversy. So the estimates are that women on average earn from 77 cents to 89 cents on the dollar relative to men. But regardless of the source, the fact that women earn less means that there are fewer resources to save,
Yeah.
along with lower employee and Social Security benefits, including retirement investments. So that constrains the resources that we have. There's a twin dynamic here in terms of caregiving. When compared to a fairly broad awareness of the pay gap, far less well recognized is that there's a dual impact of cycling in and out of the workforce when combined with lower wages. So when we think about this, whether it's tending for our parents, taking care of our parents or our kids, taking time out of work can have a very significant long-term financial impact when combined with lower earnings. So one of the most fascinating studies I've seen is a study out of the Institute for Women's Policy Research in DC, and they looked at the average earnings period in our prime of age 26 to 59, those 15 some years, and found that on average, women earn just 38 cents on the dollar, not
Wow.
77 cents, not 89 cents, but 38 cents on the dollar, because many of us are taking time out of
Yeah.
work to also care for family. So it has a significant issue. It's a significant issue from a financial planning perspective to be aware of and to plan for. And caregiving also has other financial tolls as well, beyond just the lost earnings. For those who render care, particularly for an aging or disabled relative, there's a significant toll in terms of money and health. And just to put this in perspective, the Mature Market Institute did a study in 2009 and found that the average caregiver, between lost wages, Social Security benefits, lost retirement contributions, but the total cost was well over $300,000. So think about that over a lifetime, $300,000, the cost of giving care to a family member who's disabled, almost over $250,000. It's really a staggering amount.
It certainly
And
is.
so it's really something for us to be aware of. And we know that the great majority, 60 to 75%, depending on the source, of caregivers are female. So we need to quantify what is the lower lifetime earnings impact along with any caregiving we do, whether it's to children or to older family or disabled family members.
That is just staggering to me. It's incredible to see the black and white numbers, right? To hear you say that. It really quantifies what this is all about. Incredible. And I talk to women so often who are concerned about that employment gap, and this certainly gives all of us pause to help us understand the financial ramifications. Wow. I
It's very significant, Caroline, yes.
Yeah, I
And
know I know you feel really strongly too about continuing our education throughout our lives. Do you want to speak to that, Mary?
oh, sure. I think about education as if, let's say we're at home and we're caring for our kids or our parents. I feel so very strongly about continuing our education. This is one of the most important financial investments we'll ever make, is just keeping that peanut moving forward. We
Yeah.
can't control what happens in our lives, but we can control our education. And so if you're working at home, by all means take classes online. Education is so accessible now. And if you're lucky enough to have an employer that gives you educational benefits, take advantage of those. That's perhaps the most valuable employee benefit that you'll ever get. So when we invest in our time, and this has been so valuable and profoundly powerful for me personally, it just provides you with so many more options and greater earning potential to offset maybe some of the time you need to take out of work to care for family. So stay in school
Good
is,
advice.
is
Very
my
good
advice.
advice.
And
Absolutely.
that is a financial plan, part of your financial plan. So stay in school and stay off drugs.
There you go. There you go. So, Mary, you speak so eloquently about disability because quite often as women we think we're invincible, right? We're the caregivers, we're the nurturers, and we don't realize that this can happen to any of us. Talk to me about women and disability.
Yeah, women and disability is a significant issue. And when I was at the American College as a professor and director of the center there, we did a very significant study on women and disability. And it's just one of those areas that what you don't know can really hurt you. So it's a big,
Yeah,
significant money trap. Because most of us don't think about our number one asset as really our ability to earn an income, but it is our number one asset.
right,
So
right.
when we think that over a working lifetime, most of us will earn well over $1 million, even not adjusted for inflation. So if we're making $30,000 or $40,000 a year, or $50,000 a year, and you multiply times 20 or 30, 40 years, it's not hard to get over $1 million. So That's just one thing to recognize, first of all, that disabilities during our working lives can interrupt our number one asset, and that's our ability to earn an income. The other piece that's important to know is that we're significantly more likely to become disabled than our men, and disability strikes more often than we'd like. The Social Security Administration tells us that about 1 in 4, 25% or so, of Americans over 20 will be forced to stop working at some point during their working lives. So it's not just that this happens to a few people. It happens to far more people than we'd like to think. And, disability is one of those kind of hidden incidences. We don't see people who are disabled very often walking around in the street. They're at home.
Right, right.
So it's a hidden risk factor, and it's one for us to be aware of, because as women we're more likely at all ages to become disabled. And Caroline, so just let me put you on the spot here and ask if you know the number one reason for disability.
I was actually thinking of that when you're talking, and I must confess I don't.
So it used to be, when I first started in financial services all the way back in 1990, that the number one cause for disability was heart disease. It's no longer heart disease. In fact, that's number 3 or 4. The number one cause is arthritis.
Now, is that exclusively for women, or is that women and men?
Women and men, but women
Okay.
are significantly more likely to become arthritic than our men. I mean, think about that. Most of us, if you think about mom, if you think about
Yes, hands
sisters,
on. Yeah.
we know that arthritis, rheumatoid or osteoarthritis, can strike many of us. So, and beyond just arthritis, it's musculoskeletal issues.
Yes.
So we're more likely to become arthritic than our men, and more likely to become disabled in the absolute.
Wow.
So important for us to plan for that.
Excellent. Good to know. So, two additional risks on the list of number 4 and number 5 for women are longevity and singlehood. Tell us more about those.
We talked a little bit earlier about a singlehood. It's just that, if there's not another earning partner in the house, not another financial resourcer in the
Yeah,
house,
yeah.
it just means more of the burden is on us. And oftentimes, singlehood can strike without very little notice, whether or not it's through widowhood or through divorce. So, abdicating financial responsibility is not a wise strategy. But beyond that, longevity, women do live longer than men. Most of us probably know that, on average, about 5 years. So, when we think about that, it means that if we're earning fewer dollars over our working lives, and having less Social Security benefits built up, or retirement benefits, it just means that fewer resources need to stretch even further. So again, the key underscored advice here is to just plan, and to quantify how much you might need for retirement, to quantify what the impact is of singlehood, caregiving, disability. It really doesn't have to do with a product or purchasing a product. It has to do with planning. And there's some good news when it comes to planning for
Uh,
women.
so let's hear about the good news, because I'm so encouraged by this. This gives us tangible, practical advice and action steps. So what's the next step?
So, I really encourage the planning.
Okay.
And, women are extraordinary planners. And, oftentimes we think maybe we're not very good at math. We don't know a lot about investments. It wasn't so long ago, just over 100 years ago, that many women in this country could not even own assets. In some
Wow.
states, we were actually property. And so it's not been a long time in our gender's history that we've been in control of finances. So the good news is that we have some innate, instinctive, and incredibly powerful talents when it comes to money that most of us don't even know about. So I am happy to say that we have some really good news, and women need to tap into these talents and to be empowered by them, because they can be powerfully beneficial to us when we're looking to secure a better financial future.
See, I'm so happy to hear you talk about this, because you're right. We are acculturated as women often to think that we're not good financial planners, or we don't have an aptitude for that. And as you said, that's just inaccurate. So we need to dispel the myth and embrace these talents and this intelligence that we have.
We do. We have such incredibly powerful, innate talent that most of us don't even know we've got.
So how do we
So,
leverage it? How do we leverage it, Mary?
so let's think about our talents, both in terms of process and scope.
Okay.
So when I define financial planning, I define it in two ways: process and scope. So there's a lot of misperceptions and myths about what financial planning. So it's really important to set some context here. So some people might think that financial planning is like buying a product or mutual fund or stock or taking specific actions, saving for retirement, maxing out your 401k, whatever. It is not, that is not planning. So that is buying, that's being focused on an element of planning, but it is in and of itself is not planning.
Okay.
So, and because most people focus often on the products, it can be pretty easy to get overwhelmed by all the little minutia as it relates to product, and so it's kind of not being able to see the forest through the trees. So just backing off from that, if we think of process and scope, I refer to financial planning as 6 and 6. That means that there's 6 steps in the financial planning process, and there are 6 areas in the scope of financial planning. Think of 6 and 6, process and scope. And the good news is that women are extraordinarily good at planning in the process, and we're also extraordinarily good at scope and integrating sometimes disparate elements into a cohesive whole.
That's good news. That's excellent news. So can you walk us through the 6 steps?
Yeah, so just like planning is planning, right? So when we do a plan, we identify our goals. Think of it like a vacation. So let's use that vacation metaphor as a moment. So first, we identify our goals. Where do we want to go on vacation? Second, we gather our information. What are the resources that we have? What are our limitations? How much money and time do we have? So we identify our goals, we gather our information, and identify our resources. The third step is then we do some analysis to say, what are our options here? What are our transportation, restaurant, and lodging alternatives? And then fourth, we are going to plan our strategy, and then identifying our best option and actually then booking our trip. Then
There you
we
go.
take our action, we go on our trip, and then the sixth step is we're going to evaluate how it went. So we identify, gather, analyze, plan, act, and evaluate. So that's the planning process, whether or not it's financial planning, whether or not it's vacation planning or any other kind of planning, it's just the same. And most of us would think it'd be unthinkable to just get on an airplane and travel somewhere without really having done a plan. But that's exactly what most people do when they just buy a financial product without having put a plan in place. So think about the process. We're good at process. And it's been my experience in brain biology research tells us that women are extraordinarily good at planning. This is something that comes naturally to us. For example, some recent discoveries in neuroscience have found that women, we actually have larger brain volume in our prefrontal cortex, and that's an area that's believed to enhance long-term planning. So it's a powerful talent when it comes to money. This being able to plan and actually do the 6 areas of planning is powerfully important and can be used to our advantage.
Well, this is music to my ears. So let's drill down. So we've got these 6 areas of financial planning. Can you describe those to us and how we might have some of those hidden strengths in there as well?
Yes, well, absolutely. Women generally prefer a holistic or comprehensive plan. Study after study show that one of the words that keeps on cropping up is the word holistic, often phrased as comprehensive. So we're dot connectors. And here again, brain biology research shows that women have more neural pathways between their 2 hemispheres in our brains. And that's believed to enhance our desire to want to connect information and to think holistically and see how information relates to each other. So It's tremendously powerful and a great advantage when we think about financial planning because there's 6 areas of planning and they do relate. So let me just drill down a little bit on these 6 areas so that there's some context,
Yeah, that'd be great.
and we can see how they relate. So the first area in financial planning is our financial position. And I like to think of this as our financial machine or engine that we're driving. It has to deal with our cash flow, our income versus our expenses, has to deal with our net worth or what we own versus what we own. And so we want to make sure that the engine of our financial car is working as efficiently as it possibly can. So that is everything is working in harmony, and that we have adequate cash reserves to meet an emergency. So financial position is kind of square one.
Okay.
Then we look at protection planning. And this is really putting a plan in place to protect the things that we cannot afford to lose. Now, some people think that this is about buying insurance. It is not about buying insurance.
Okay.
It is about having a game plan in place. It's about understanding what the risks are. So we talked about disability as an example. What's the likelihood I could become disabled? What's at risk? What kind of resources do I have? What would I do if I became disabled? Would I go live with my kids or my parents? Or how would my lifestyle change? What impact will that have on my financial plan? What are the resources that are available to me? And is there a gap? Insurance can be a tool to fill a gap, but it's not about insurance. It's about having a game plan in place. And it's so much more powerfully, it's so much more important to think about the game plan than it is to think about the product. So start with the game plan. And then there are 3 options in insurance. You can transfer all of your risk to an insurance company. You can transfer some, you can transfer none. So it's really understanding what your options are and putting a plan in place.
Great.
The third area is investment planning, and just like people think it's like buying a mutual fund or asset allocation. Again, it's not. It's really quantifying what do we want, what are the things that we want to accumulate for, or how do we want to use our wealth. So it's being very purpose driven in terms of our investments. Again, quantifying how long of a time frame we have to achieve our investment goal, what we want to fund in particular, what kind of rate of return we need, what savings we're able to devote to our goal, what's our risk tolerance, and putting all those factors together again into a plan. So the product itself, the type of mutual fund or wealth management account or whatever we have is just a tool to help us get there, not the plan. Related to investment planning is retirement planning, and again, it's quantifying what does retirement look like, and a lot of people don't like the word retirement. I think it's better to think about financial independence.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a time in our lives when work is optional, and we can choose whether or not to work, and that's really the true definition of financial planning. I mean, financial independence. Excuse me. So better to think about financial independence. When do we want to have that time in our lives where work is optional, not that we have to go and do it every day? It's by our choice that we work. And so putting a plan in place and quantifying when and what that might look like, what are the resources we have, and what do we need to do in the future is so empowering. And along with that, if we're in retirement, how long do we expect our resources to last, and what kind of lifestyle do they need to cover, and what are the other sources of income we might have beyond our savings, but also Social Security and our spouse. So that's retirement planning. And the last 2 areas are just our estate and tax planning. And here we're talking about more than documents.
Yes.
So taxes, it's not about tax planning generally is not doing your 1040 because that's historical. And we want to think about our tax liabilities in the future. How will taxes affect our future security? So we quantify potential for taxes, as an example, to go up in retirement. And when we look at estate planning, it's not about a will or a trust. It's not about the documents there. It's about really living and leaving a legacy about the things that matter to us most. So those are the 6 areas of financial planning: financial position, protection, investment, retirement, taxes, and estate planning. And they all relate to each other. What
They
we
do.
certainly can easily see that taxes pretty much cross everything.
Yes.
So, as a great example, so when we work towards a financial plan, we want to see how all these dots connect, because when we can connect the dots, we can leverage synergies, we can reduce our costs. And again, women are dot connectors. So the whole 6 by 6, the scope and process of planning, women just get. It's been my experience as an academic, it's been my experience as a financial planner, that we just get process and scope. And those are incredibly important allies for us to tap into when we're putting together our financial plan.
You're speaking my language. I'm a dot connector. I'm a planner. I like to hear this. Mary, you've given us so much to think about, and I'm really, really pleased with this information. But how do we find out more about comprehensive financial planning? What's the next step after we've started to connect these dots?
Well, I would encourage our listeners to go out to the Certified Financial Planner Board website. That's available for the public. They can go see some great tools on www.letsmakeaplan. That's all one word, letsmakeaplan.org. And there's some tremendous information out there on both the why and the how comprehensive planning works. They also can point our listeners to a qualified certified financial planner in their area. Also, check out the MoneyWeave website at www.moneyweave.com. We put some great financial tools out there, educational articles, videos, and calculators for our listeners to view, listen to, read, to become more financially empowered and to improve their financial journey towards security.
Mary, this has been extraordinary. I can't thank you enough. I feel enlightened and empowered to connect my financial dots, as it were, and I really appreciate this information. I know our listeners have benefited from it, and I'm eager to follow up with some of the website resources you just mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Caroline. It's been
It
great.
it's been such a delight, and I hope our paths cross again soon. I want to thank Mary Quist-Newins, president of MoneyWeave LLC, for joining me today as my guest expert. Mary, take good care, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Caroline. You too.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for tuning into Your Working Life today, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. True career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.